The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees the right of free expression, including freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Freedom of religion is the right to practice whatever religion one chooses. Presbyterian Church versus Whole Church. This case was brought in response to the attempts by two Georgia churches to withdraw from the control of the U.S. Presbyterian Church. The local churches alleged that the church leadership had strayed from the original doctrines and tenets upon which the faith was based. The Superior Court found for the local churches because it decided that the implied trust between the local and national churches was terminated because of the latter's substantial departure from its original doctrines. The court unanimously decided that the Superior Court overstepped its constitutional powers by involving itself in this dispute. The Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional for courts to make decisions regarding which beliefs were essential to a religious group. While making this decision, the court reaffirmed its right to involve itself in making decisions relating to church property. Freedom of religion is so important because no matter what one's religion is, all religions have one thing in common. If an individual is forced to follow certain customs and beliefs, that person is not wholeheartedly being religious. Religion is like a pair of shoes. Find one that fits you, but don't make me wear your shoes. George Carlin. Freedom of expression includes freedom of assembly, freedom of press, and freedom of speech. To become self-aware, people must be allowed to hear a plurality of opinions and then make up their own minds. They must be allowed to say, write, and publish whatever they want. Freedom of expression is the most basic but fundamental right. Without it, human beings are being reduced to automatons. Mia Wan. Freedom of speech is the right to express any opinions without censorship or restraint. Bethel School District Number 403 vs. Frazier. A public high school student delivered a nominating speech on behalf of another student at a student assembly. The speech contained elaborate and immature sexual innuendo. The school suspended the student for violating the school's non-disruption rule, which prohibited obscene, profane language. The student contended that the suspension violated his First Amendment rights because his speech caused no disruption of school activities within the meaning of Tinker. The issue was whether school officials may prohibit a vulgar and lewd student speech at a student assembly, even if the speech does not create a substantial disruption. In a 7-2 decision, the court held that the school officials may prohibit student speech before a student assembly that is vulgar, lewd, and plainly offensive. Freedom of speech is very important in decision-making at all levels. Discussion and consideration of a representative range of views have to be considered. Where there is freedom of speech, criticisms to a government are freely voiced and can therefore be responded to, but if there is a restriction, rumors, unfair criticisms, and other falsehoods are circulated by word of mouth. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. George Orwell. Freedom of the press or freedom of the media is the freedom of communication and expression through mediums including various electronic media and published materials. Pickering vs. Board of Education. A high school science teacher wrote a letter to the editor of a community newspaper criticizing the Board of Education's allocation of funds between academics and athletics. The school board terminated the teacher, saying that the letter contained false statements that questioned the integrity of the school system. The teacher sued, claiming that the board violated his First Amendment rights by terminating him for exercising his right to freedom of speech. The issue was whether school officials violate the First Amendment by terminating a teacher for writing a letter to the editor that discusses important matters of public concern. By an 8-1 vote, the court held that the school officials do violate the First Amendment when they terminate a public school teacher for speaking out as a citizen on matters of public concern. Freedom of the press is important because it allows information to be posted about people or the government. In some countries, nothing can be written that sheds a dark light on the government. A free press can, of course, be good or bad, but most certainly without freedom, the press will never be anything but bad. Albert Camus. The United States Constitution explicitly provides for the rights of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. In the First Amendment, like other rights, freedom of assembly is not absolute. Reno vs. American Civil Liberties Union. Congress passed provisions in the Communications Decency Act of 1996 to protect minors from harmful material on the Internet. Two provisions criminalize the display of indecent or patently offensive online communications. The American Civil Liberties Union and many other groups challenged the constitutionality of these provisions in federal court. They argued that these provisions infringed on First Amendment free speech rights. A lower federal court ruled the two provisions violated the First Amendment. The government appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The issue was whether federal laws prohibited the display of patently offensive and indecent online speech violate the First Amendment. By a 7-2 margin, the court held that the two provisions did violate the First Amendment. Freedom of assembly is important because it gives people a voice in our country and it allows people to express their opinions. In the life of the human spirit, words are action, much more so than many of us may realize who live in countries where freedom of expression is taken for granted. The leaders of totalitarian nations understand this very well. The proof is that words are precisely the action for which descendants in those countries are being persecuted. Jimmy Carter.